Hello again everyone and welcome to my next video. In today's video segment I will be continuing where I left off in part 6 of Rabbi Gestetner's refutation of the lies of Feigelstock and Kahan. The original Collive video and Rabbi Gestetner's complete refutation letter in Lashon HaKodesh is linked in the description box below this video. I have partnered up with Rabbi Gestetner in presenting to you the English version of his refutations to statements made by Avi Kahan and Yosef Feigelstock. So without further ado, let's dive in to statement number 9. At approximately the 25-minute mark, Avi Kahan quotes the Chazon Ish that quotes the pasuk, Vayhi bimei shvoit hashoftim, where one way to translate this pasuk is that the people are judging the judges, meaning that they are critical of their rulings and hence don't want to follow their verdicts. Let's listen in to Avi Kahan's statement.
But when everyone's deciding what we call Adam Asadin din Afshay, people are taking matters into their own hands. Or like the Chazon Ish writes in the Sefer Emunah B'Tachim, in the 3rd chapter, he writes like this, he writes, we live in a generation that judges the judges. And therefore everyone's able to do whatever they want because everybody's able to say, oh, him? He's corrupt, he doesn't know what he's talking about, I want to compare it to that case. So you want to know, is there any lies going around? I don't believe so. The question is we have to try to understand the comparisons, and people have to explain their case and how they're comparing it to a specific case. And I think that causes a mass confusion.
Rabbi Gestetner's response is that Avi Kahan should learn the source Gemara of this statement, which is in Masechet Baba Basra, Daf 15b, where Rashi over there learns Pshat in Vayhi bimei shvoit hashoftim, that this statement actually speaks about the sad state of affairs where the judges were actually so openly corrupted that the litigants had good reasons to criticize them. Avi Kahan searches for key statements made by someone else, in this case the Chazon Ish, but doesn't share with you the entire lesson from the Chazon Ish. So I personally reviewed this Chazon Ish in chapter 3 of Emunah and Bitachon, where he specifically quotes the Gemara Baba Basra 58b that brings examples of judges who are unqualified to be a judge due to their previous guilt of theft, because a thief is not trusted to be a dayan due to him being suspect of taking a bribe. Also, that very Chazon Ish even quotes the same statement that Avi Kahan quoted, which is Ovid inish din el nafshe, that yes, when you suspect that you will be cheated out and suffer great loss at the hands of the corrupted judge, then you take matters into your own hands. But Rabbi Gestetner continues his criticism of Kahan by stating that if Kahan wanted to quote the Chazon Ish, then he should also have quoted the Chazon Ish in his Kovetz Igrois, where the Chazon Ish is very critical of those that deal with matters of Eishes Ish. In essence, Hilchos Gittin, where these halochos deal with serious sins, and yet there are individuals who want to act leniently without providing adequate valid sources to allow such leniencies. It is the one who acts stringently that shouldn't need to provide the halachic backup. Yet Rabbi Gestetner, in his ridicule of Avi Kahan, states that he always provides adequate poskim to back up his position of being machmir or strict in matters of gittin. Yet Kahan does not provide even one valid source to justify his leniencies, which is laughable. And now, let's move on to statement number 10. At approximately the 26-minute mark, Avi Kahan cites what parameters are used to determine halacha, who is acceptable, who is not, how do we determine what is the majority of poskim, and when do we force a get, etc. Let's listen in to his own words.
But Rabbi Khan, you also don't know what's going on. Who are you to say anything?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I don't know what's going on. But we have to share common values in what our halacha system is, of who gets to make the decision. What's considered an option that's, according to all the poskim, not acceptable? What's considered a machlekes ha-poskim? Which poskim get to make decisions? So, for example, Rabbi Feigelstock brought up a very, very good point. He said there's a halacha in Shulchan Aruch, a siman, that discusses who you could force. That means there's nobody who disagrees if you're allowed to force people to give a get. The question is, who could you force? That is the disagreement. Could you force somebody who says I'm repulsed? Could you not? Machlokes hapoiskim. How do you understand that? Machlokes hapoiskim. There have been svarim. I have a sefer I was looking for it before in my library. I couldn't find it right now, which is called Elu Shekoifin Lahoitzi. These are the people you're allowed to force. And I think he goes through over 100 different personalities. 100 different personalities, and certain personalities, what were they in the time of Chazal? How did Chazal understand narcissism? How did Chazal understand addiction? What would have their opinion been by addiction with everything in Torah? Baruch Hashem, our Torah is alive. Our Torah, we say, Kiyem Chayinu, our Torah is alive. Our Torah is understood by the Gedolei Yisrael of our times. And therefore, throughout the generations, it's never been stopped. Through the Rambam, to the Rashba, to the Rosh, to the Ritva. All the Rishonim discuss that Gemara that says, Eil Shekoifin Leitzin. Who are they? Could you add to that list? Could you understand that list? Is there a different list? Is that list specifically talking about a case that's not an Aguna or a case that isn't Aguna? So many discussions. And the question is, which place are we going to follow? Which place do Klal Yisrael accept as our authorities? And I think those are the place that we have to stick to. The place in the Gedolei Yisrael that Klal Yisrael accepted, that they were known, that they have hundreds of Talmidim throughout the world that's saying, we accept you, we have Emunah and you being a Chacham and you to tell us what the Messiah was and how to understand Torah. I mean, without that, how can we understand how to use electricity?
Rabbi Gestetner's response is that Avi Kahan is a jokester who's suggesting to us to learn from him what the meaning of the majority of poskim means. He makes it appear that deciding halacha in divorce is very complicated, when in reality 99% of divorce cases today fall in the category of moas alai, which we already know that the majority of poskim rule that you cannot force a get under any circumstances. The great sages known as the Rishonim, namely 36 of them, have already issued their rulings that one cannot add any more cases of coercion other than those listed in the Mishnah, Masechet Ksuvas 77a. Even the Shulchan Aruch, Siman 154, states the same thing, and only in very rare and extreme cases can we add to this list. So therefore, today we should not be seeing any coerced gittin, but unfortunately the opposite is true. Therefore, no gadol today, even if he's regarded a towering figure in Torah like a cedar tree, has no halachic right to overrule the great sages of the past that prohibited adding to the existing list of categories permitting coercion. Rabbi Gestetner declares that those that attempt to add to the list are Reformed Jews that erroneously feel that they are empowered to change whatever they want. These reformers feel that what was forbidden before in previous generation can now be changed as they wish. This is pure heresy and is in direct contradiction to the 13 principles of faith listed at the end of the Shacharis prayer, which number 9 from the 13 states, and I quote, I believe in complete faith that this Torah will not be exchanged, nor will there be another Torah from the Creator. Blessed is his name. End quote. Rabbi Gestetner further refutes and exposes Avi Kahan's fraudulent statements by his mentioning a book called Elu Shekoifin Lahoitzi, as if this author had created for us solutions in finding other cases to coerce. Instead, this author is just one more charlatan rabbi who gathered a list of fake sources to help them reform the established customs and halochos of gittin. The charlatan authors publish books to distract, turn your attention away from, and distort what is termed roiv minyan ubinyan, which means that they don't want you to know about the established pattern used for halachic rulings, which is that we follow the majority opinion. This can be defined as a halacha that is determined by a consensus based upon a majority-based construct. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry can just publish a sefer and proclaim to be an expert, but the established practice of how we rule in halacha has already been set in stone, and those that attempt to deviate from this practice are charlatans. Our halachic traditions emanate from great Rishonim, which were compared to angels. Nothing has changed from previous generations that the great sages have not already addressed. Instead, the Reformed rabbis of today, and especially the Israeli rabbinate, have decided to uproot the concept of get mausa, also known as coerced get, and started to invent new ways to coerce a get from husbands, clearly in violation of accepted halacha, by utilizing methods such as shaming a public, illegal detention orders, and even jailing husbands. These illegal methods are being utilized daily by unscrupulous rabbis to forcibly extract gittin from them. Avi Kahan insinuates that a husband with an addiction problem can be coerced, but we know that the poskim have already forbidden coercion on a man who is a chronic alcoholic. There are multiple places in halacha that cite alcohol addiction, and none of the poskim permit coercion in such cases. Rabbi Gestetner cites the Mari Weil, the Marshal, the Maritz, and the Mases Moshe that all forbid coercion with an alcoholic. You can find these actual sources by looking at Rabbi Gestetner's Pinkas Bezdin document 5028b, chapter 24, which is also linked below. Rabbi Gestetner points out that the Kahan is trying to convince his audience that everyone must trust and listen to the Bezdin rulings, but can you, Kahan, produce one divorce case that came to your Bezdin where you prohibited the use of the halochos Rabbeinu Tam, or punishing sanctions that you customarily place on men refusing to give a get? So why do you, Kahan, lie to the public and make them believe that you need to come to a Bezdin to make the distinctions between cases of coercion versus cases that you can coerce, where you know darn well that you have never ruled on a case where the man cannot be coerced? You just finished stating that there are all types of cases. So why don't we see some cases where the man is innocent and cannot be coerced? The answer is that you are a charlatan pretending to be fair and balanced in halacha, but your intentions are to lure innocent men into your bezdin, thinking that they will be treated fairly according to halachic standards, and then issue your distorted ruling of coercion against them. We then see Kahan trying to fool the listeners into believing that we have to follow the gedolim of our days, who have many followers, in an effort to get the listeners to ignore the great sages of the past and the established halacha, but instead wants you to adopt what today's heretical rabbis have to say, even though these rabbis' opinions clash with the previous sages that maintained roiv minyan opinion. And of course, he can bring logical and practical proof of why the opinions of the great sages from the previous generations do not apply in today's halachic rulings. Rabbi Gestetner concludes by citing the Igros Moshe or Chaim and Yoredeya. See below for exact citations. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein states vehemently that whoever finds discrepancies or errors in his halacha in any of his books should notify the public that he disagrees with him, and even if it's his student. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was concerned about halachic integrity. Rabbi Feinstein forbade printing an abridged version of his halachic responsa, but rather wanted the printing of his books to include all his cited sources and all his methods used to arrive at the final verdict, so that the reader can determine if any of his cited sources or methods of conclusion were done accurately. Rabbi Feinstein is also quoted as saying that anything that has already been determined to be prohibited should remain prohibited. Even if great rabbis try to permit it, we must not pay them any attention. Similarly, Rabbi Feinstein mentions examples with achronim, such as the Bar Levi and Minchas Yechiel, that cannot argue with our sages who have already established halacha without providing authentic sources disproving the great sages' arrival at their final halacha. These statements made by the great Rabbi Feinstein are in direct contradiction to Avi Kahan's statements about the great rabbis of today's generation that we must adhere to everything they say, even if it contradicts the great sages before. I would like to conclude that Rabbi Gestetner has already found several places in the Igros Moshe where a later print of the same Sefer, Igros Moshe, had some changes made that contradict the earlier print. Would you believe it if I told you that the discrepancy in the print happens to be on the subject of aguna and get mausa. This raises great suspicion that unfortunately his books have been tampered with to allow heretic rabbis to twist the halacha based on this discrepancy, and it was likely used to make Moshe appear as if he agreed with the New York Get law. You can learn more about the tampering of Ramoshe's tshuvas by visiting Pinchas Bezdin and downloading document 1023 or through the link I provided below. Therefore, you can conclude that any rabbi, including Avi Kahan, who attempts to give credence to a contemporary rabbi's statement while disregarding the halacha of an earlier sage, which contradicts the later generation rabbi, then you should know that he's a fraudster and should not pay any attention to his words. This is why, in the American channel, you will hear me repeat the following warning: stay away from Bezdin in matters of divorce, and stay away from the state of Israel to prevent your incarceration. Be smart, be prudent, and don't be gullible. Thank you all for watching, and see you all in the next video.